Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the crypto mass extinction event. How in the future there might be a moment where there could be a ton of coins that die. And that moment is called the Great Filter event. And it actually has to do with a terminology used in science fiction and thinking about how alien species, like why we don't see Star Wars-esque alien species cruising around the universe. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen. This comes out, this is the Held Report. This is a newsletter that comes out every Thursday. Paid subscribers get this first. It's my freshest thoughts on Bitcoin, and you'll get them first if you subscribe here. So yeah, this is the topic this week, and let's go ahead and start with the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox is a term that describes why we don't see all of these Star Wars-esque civilizations cruising around the universe. Why don't we see these giant, huge civilizations with like Death Stars and Star Destroyers and Dyson spheres where they cover the entire sun? Well, there's a theory. And the theory is that there's a great filter event. And by the way, the numbers that we're talking about here are enormous. There are 100 to 400 billion stars in our galaxy, and they're estimated to be 100 to 400 billion galaxies. So when you do the math, you go, okay, well, how many planets might be able to harbor life? How many planets weren't destroyed by like an asteroid or had cataclysmic events? And how much time has elapsed to allow life to evolve to something much more advanced like a human civilization? Even given all of those parameters, even given a very low likelihood that life could succeed, we should see millions of advanced civilizations, but we don't. It's quiet, it's dark out there. So there's a hypothesis that there's a great filter event. The great filter event would be an event like nuclear weapons that just, and maybe nuclear weapons 99.9% of the time destroy the civilization. So it's essentially a mass extinction event that most civilizations can't avoid. Another one might be like antimatter weapons. 1 gram of antimatter would be able to destroy like an entire city, and defending against that would be almost impossible. So things like that would be great filter events, or a plague. Currently we've got COVID, and maybe there's a really potent plague that's created. Maybe it's created in a lab or something like that. So, with human civilization, we don't know if that moment is behind us or in front of us. Are nuclear weapons that moment and we've passed through it? Or is it something coming up like antimatter or some crazy virus? We don't know. But with crypto, we do know. With crypto, we know that mass extinction event, that great filter, is state-level censorship resistance. It's being able to survive a government attack. The government is this omnipotent, all-powerful, massive beast. I mean, they essentially soak up a huge portion of the economy through the form of taxes and are able to redistribute that by going and allocating money to certain things. They have control over your entire life. They have control over what you do with your body, what you do with your money, and they have police, military to go enforce that in a physical manner. So when we think about a new crypto asset, how does it go about surviving this great filter event? Well, there's a lot of other stages before it even gets there. You've got the origin. So Bitcoin's origin, Bitcoin is if we can think about it like money is like a different species or like a new organism, it's a new species of money. And the code of life, or Bitcoin's genetic code, is actually, it's the actual code written into it. It's the code that wrote in different instructions and different incentivization methods to organize the cells and how humans all work with it. You can kind of think of it like Bitcoin's blockchain and how it rewards miners and hodlers is somewhat like how the human body has different blood cells that perform different functions. And that's where people often think, oh, well, Bitcoin is sort of the MySpace, right? Well, actually, Bitcoin is is coming from 40 years of research and development. So, by the way, I write about Bitcoin as a species in my Planting Bitcoin series on danheld.com, so definitely recommend you check that out. It's my most popular article I ever wrote. It's basically a really good analogy for thinking about how Satoshi's brilliance wasn't just in the species of tree the species he chose to plant, but it was the season, the soil, and the gardening techniques that led to Bitcoin's success. A chart I made there was Bitcoin's prehistory. Now, definitely want to give a hat tip to Ansel Linder, the guy who originally made this. I took this and made a bunch of different changes to, I think, make it a little bit easier to read. But all of these led to Bitcoin's creation. So each one, Bitcoin is built on all of these other discoveries. Bitcoin isn't a MySpace. It's not, it's not the first, cryptocurrency organism to ever be created. It's the first one that survived. It's the first one that survived on the operating table. And Satoshi spliced all those pieces of genetic code from all these different other previous versions and then Frankenstein that together to make Bitcoin. What's funny is that this was so Frankenstein that Satoshi actually thought he was late to cryptocurrency. He actually says, a lot of people, this is Satoshi talking, a lot of people automatically dismiss e-currency as a lost cause because of all the companies that failed since the 1990s. I hope it's obvious it was only the centrally controlled nature of those systems that doomed them. I think this is the first time we're trying a decentralized, non-trust-based system. And that's ultimately how you survive state-level, state government attacks, and that's what I'll get into later. So when we look at a cryptocurrency, first it had to survive on the operating table, had to survive in the wild, and Bitcoin was the first one to do that after 40 years of experimentation. And then a lot of coins die. There's at least 2,000 known dead cryptocurrencies. So deadcoins.com is kind of a funny website where you can scroll through and check out all the dead coins and they've got sort of categorizations here of scam or deceased. These are just the ones that were recorded. There's who knows how many more they haven't recorded. So tons of coins don't even live on the operating table. Some of them die immediately. Some of them die out over time. And then there's a lot of zombie coins. So if you go to CoinMarketCap, which I've got the tab open here, and you go to like page 80, like the last page, I mean, some of these things don't even have, this one's I think promoted here, but most of them don't even have volume or market cap. And, even if you go to like page, you skip a few pages ahead, I mean, we're talking like, these are essentially just a bunch of garbage. And this is like thousands and thousands of coins that are basically dead. And let's say you survive those stages. You're not a zombie coin where it's technically alive because a couple nodes are running, but there's no economic activity. There's still the alive, but fading. And most coins that you know of fall into this bucket. Dan Tapiro had a really great tweet here that he put out. Tone Vase put this together. So Tone Vase looks at the alts that go into the top 10, so the top 10 cryptocurrencies by market cap, and then fade out over time. So I've been around as long as Tone has, and we have seen a ton come and go. Like this list here is all the cryptocurrencies that have come into the top 10 and popped out. And he's got all of these listed here. It's funny because most people don't even know what these are, like the DAO, Quark, MadeSafe coin. Some of these look more familiar, of course, like Ethereum, XRP, Litecoin. Staying in the top 10 and being relevant and capturing that network effect and liquidity is really difficult to have, year over year to stay up there. And it's just, there's only a very few coins that can survive at that level. So when we look at the survivability of a crypto asset, hard to survive in the beginning, hard to survive the youth. And then when you make it to the final arena where you try to battle Bitcoin and you try to survive state level attacks, there's very few that remain up there in the top 10. Bitcoin has been persistent in the number one spot for the entire time. Okay, so what does it take to survive a state level attack? Well, to build it, to build it resilient against governments, it needs to be protected on the protocol, social, and economic levels. And all of these are required to make it work. They're all intertwined. During the 2017 craze, there was a hypothesis that decentralization was this sliding scale, which there are elements of coins that are more or less decentralized. However, in the context of a government resistance, so can it resist a government attack? It's a binary outcome that you'll only know about when you hit that moment. That's why this is the great filter event. All these coins are surviving now, but what happens when they hit that moment when they need to fight against the government? And, it's something to where there's a couple different ways you can try to measure this, and that's where I'll dig in here. So, for example, Bitcoiners know that running a full node is a critical element of keeping Bitcoin decentralized. With a full node, I'm completely sovereign. I don't need to rely on any third party to connect, transact, or validate with the Bitcoin blockchain. I'm directly plugged in, directly connected, no third parties. And keeping Bitcoin's block size small was, partially an effort to keep the cost of a node running and accessible and cheap to all. So this attitude is not kept with other crypto assets. For example, like Ethereum. Ethereum, Vitalik, and others have kind of downplayed having a full archival node, which is a Bitcoin full node. And they kind of, they downplay and are having issues validating their own blockchain when it's so difficult to run. That's why the joke Inferium, based on Infura, the service provider, and Ethereum, the protocol. Inferium sort of is a funny take on what the Ethereum network is, where a lot of folks rely on Infura. So this actually happened a couple months ago. And when Infura was down, crypto exchanges, different protocol, different smart contracts, a whole bunch of different things started to break up a little bit. Where there was so much running an Ethereum full node accurately is so difficult that all of these companies started to outsource to Infura, including, like, for example, Binance was hit, and the popular Ethereum wallet MetaMask too. So that's an example of decentralization that's necessary to survive state level attack. Otherwise, states could go attack those servers that are hosting these full nodes. Or if there's like high data throughput that's necessary, it just makes it really prohibitive to go do that. And here's another reason, for example, like large blocks makes full nodes more expensive. You need more bandwidth. So on the block size limit controversy Bitcoin Wikipedia page, this goes through some of the reasons why you want to run a full node. Okay, now on the social level, we've got leaders. With Bitcoin, Satoshi understood this intimately, that having no leader was key to its success. Without Satoshi there, you can't really attack Bitcoin. Like, if Satoshi's a pseudonymous individual, we don't know anything about him, which is great. He also didn't give himself a pre-mine, which would have been controversial, and he left once he felt comfortable that everyone could take the project and run with it. And so that's where Satoshi stands in stark contrast to many other protocols. For example, like with Ethereum, what happens if Vitalik disappeared tomorrow? Or what happens if something happened to Vitalik? And I hope nothing does, but he's a weak point in the protocol. You shouldn't have these leaders. We shouldn't have this developer worship. We shouldn't have this individual that we put so much hope and faith into. And Dhruv has a great quote here, Dhruv Bansal from Unchained Capital. The leaderlessness is one part that gives Bitcoin in particular, beyond other cryptocurrencies today, such robustness. And Federico Tinga had a great quote too, where he said, Satoshi left because he didn't want his influence to affect the protocol development, creating a single point of failure. The very idea of Satoshi's vision itself is against Satoshi's vision for Bitcoin. This vision of a decentralized social decision-making fabric versus a very top-down hierarchical structure like having one individual like Vitalik. And this goes into governance as well. So with Bitcoin, we essentially have a standoff between the miners, the nodes and hodlers, and the companies. And that's what's great. It's very hard to make change happen versus many of these other protocols. Boom, you just talk to a couple individuals and new code is pushed. So this ensures that Bitcoin's properties can't be changed very easily without basically 100% of folks on board. And then, under this social dynamic as well, we've got the Lindy effect. So the longer that Bitcoin remains in existence and survives, the longer it will be perceived to stay in existence. Just like gold. Gold has been around for 4,000 years. People always think about gold as like this long-time permanent thing that will always be here. And the Bitcoin hodlers are the core beating heart of this. And then, as Tobias puts it, hodling bootstrap Bitcoin into existence. Hodling increases value, which increases demand, hash rate, and network security, which in turn attracts hodlers and developers. It's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. And that's what Bitcoin needs, and that's what you need for a protocol to keep it alive, to keep it really hardened and decentralized and be able to resist a government attack. You need a lot of people that believe in it. And then finally, on the economic front, there's an objective metric that we can look at that signals the long-term viability of these chains, and it's called the security model. With Bitcoin and every other blockchain, the miners receive a block reward. The block reward is comprised of newly minted Bitcoins plus transaction fees. And this is what incentivizes the miners to behave properly by ordering transactions in the right direction. As we see here, Bitcoin's supply curve over time, you've got the 4-year halving cycles. We just went through one last year. And eventually that'll reach 21 million Bitcoin and there won't be any more. So transaction fees have to compensate for the drop in the subsidy. And what we've seen with Bitcoin is that it is doing that. I wrote an article on this called Bitcoin Security is Fine on danheld.com. Take a look at it. It goes through every single nuanced part about how that process works and how I even model it out. And we go through a bunch of different ways to think through transaction fees or the block subsidy, etc. So if you want to go in deep dive there, check that out. But here's the objective metric. So here's what is really, really objective here on how this will all play out. Ethereum and Bitcoin, which is the green and pink lines, these are the only two crypto assets that are accruing any sort of transactional fee demand, which means that they will be able to replace that subsidy over time, versus these little dots down here. That's everything else. That's every other cryptocurrency. None of them have any sort of meaningful transaction fees, which means that over time, their security models is going to get weaker and weaker and open them up to 51% attacks, aka governments could spend less money to attack them. And we're already seeing this happen on Ethereum Classic, Grin, and other cryptocurrencies that have a very weak reward. But this is, I think, the best objective long-term way to zoom out and look at the viability of these chains and if they could survive a state-level attack. Will transaction fees compensate the miners in a game theoretic way to where they will behave properly versus a government coming in and bribing the miners, or the government coming in and buying miners and trying to manipulate the network themselves? So overall, these cryptocurrencies have survived in a relatively, you could call it, utopian environment where they haven't been very attacked, from like they've been attacked on kind of a level that we are about to see a huge, when states feel threatened by cryptocurrencies, they will attack them at their hardest, and very, very few of them will survive. It'll be very difficult for these coins to survive unless they have, on the social, economic, and political level, these different decentralization mechanics, and Bitcoin is the only one that thinks about it that holistically. Bitcoin is hardened and been made to survive this final battle, this final great filter event. Well, if you like this, give me a like, subscribe to the channel. Also, again, you can subscribe to the newsletter. So if you're a paid subscriber, you get to do on Sundays, there's a Q&A that I do where you'll be able to ask me any question that you like. Also, you can vote on the next topic, which is really fun. And you get this content first on Thursdays. So a couple days later is when I do this video, but you'll get it first there. Hope you enjoyed, and thank you. Cheers.